Hey, good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us for the first Working from Home Tools, Strategies, and Best Practices webinar. Our goal for this webinar is to have it somewhat like a town hall, like a live session where we can have a conversation about your biggest concerns. We put together a few slides that we will go through fairly quickly. Feel free to ask questions throughout the course of the webinar. When we open it up, we'll be answering any questions that come in live. Once the webinar is over, we will be sending it out as a recording to anybody who didn't get a chance to stay for the entire webinar, as well as have it be shared to anyone else that may have additional questions. You can follow up with us. There's a slide after the very last slide offers our website information and our contact information. We are available to continue to chat after the webinar as well. So I would like to start by introducing Jason and Josh. They are...
Hello.
So Jason is the president of Mosaic Data Services, and Josh is the director of operations. So we have been working remotely since 2011, and we'll tell you a little bit more about our background and who we are and what we've been doing. There are some poll questions that should be coming up just to give us a better idea of what your biggest struggle is right now, either what type of services or what type of tools you feel would be most beneficial to you at this time. And so, Jason, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about your background.
Sure. Well, thanks, Tanya, for hosting this. I know we put this together on pretty short notice, so thank you for all that you've done to get us to this point. That's fantastic. Very excited to be doing this. This is our first webinar of this type, so so forgive us if we're a little bit rough around the edges. I know for me, it's, you know, speaking about things like this is pretty natural, but this format is new, so hopefully it'll go well and smoothly. Mosaic has been around for a long time. I started this business in 2000. We, initially were doing internet services for hotels, believe it or not, back when we had to pay for internet service if we stayed overnight in a hotel room. And that business evolved over the years into a more traditional managed services company where we were providing desktop support and a variety of services, email, website development, and other things. And then in 2011, it sort of has taken its present form, or it took its present form of Mosaic Data Services, which is essentially a cloud-based managed services business. Everything that we do has something to do with the data center, which in my mind is the equivalent of the cloud. There are different types of cloud when you talk about cloud, but effectively the data center, whether it's something that we run and control ourselves or somebody else does, that's really where the cloud is. And so we've been doing that very effectively. And at the same time in 2011, when we made this transition to cloud services, we also made a decision that we would virtualize our office at the same time, because in order to, we wanted to sort of practice what we preach. So it was important that we not only help people with this, but that we were sort of doing it for ourselves as well. So in 2011, we made the transition by design to a fully virtualized situation. All of our infrastructure was moved to the data center, where we had quite a bit of our infrastructure anyway, but now it was 100% there. And we have 5 different data centers around the area. Fortunately, this area is considered May East, which is a big internet hub, as opposed to May West, which is out on the West Coast. So we're lucky to have such a great presence in this area of internet service and otherwise, so that we, even in 2011, which seems like light years ago, we were able to effectively move into the data center without too much of a challenge to our productivity or efficiency, and then grow with the different services that have evolved over the years, and a lot of those that we'll talk about today, to keep our business working efficiently over that the last 9 or 10 years now, as it turns out. So Mosaic has been doing this, both preaching it and living it for the better part of the last 10 years. And as you can imagine, like anything with technology, the sophistication of the platforms that we use and we depend on has just, grown tremendously, exponentially, really. And now, as the result of what we're facing with coronavirus, it's even ignited that further. So I can only imagine from this point forward that it's just going to be an even faster evolution toward an office-free workplace, where there is no need anymore to go to a cubicle and do your work, that you'll be able to function just as effectively and productively at home or in your home office as you would if you had to make the commute. So so that's where Mosaic that's what we're doing. That's how it kind of came to be. And hopefully this webinar will shed some light on some of the tools and other things that we have used and do use to get there.
Mm-hmm. Jason, thank you very much for that introduction.
Sure.
Josh, would you mind spending just a moment, just talk a little bit about your background and
The orchestrator.
some perspective? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, I joined Mosaic in 2016, and my role has grown here to the point where I'm now sort of overseeing all of our operational side of things. Keeping the trains running, as it were, on time most of the time. So we, in partnership with our developers, our engineers, and our clients, my role, especially lately, has been looking at, not just the technologies that we use and rely on every day for our virtual office, but looking at what's on the horizon and what's upcoming, what's going to make things better. Testing out those new technologies and how we can implement them for ourselves and for our clients to be more productive, and especially now, to not have to go into the office. What can be done to facilitate and ease that transition away from the commute and the 9 to 5 to where you're working from home, but you can still be just as productive, if not more productive, than you were when you were working from the office.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think you can oftentimes be more productive. I mean, there's some challenges there, but it's certainly possible.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I keep the servers running and keep making those improvements, both to our own infrastructure, as well as seeing what's out there and just exploring new tools and platforms and seeing what we can do to make other people's lives easier.
That's right.
So one of the challenges of putting together this webinar was the multiple audiences that we're speaking to. So some of the information that we have speaks to an audience that has just begun working from home. Some of the information speaks to an audience that has been working from home for longer, or runs a business and they have contractors or people that are currently working from home. So if we don't answer all of your questions as part of the information that we're going to be providing, please do ask the question we will answer it afterwards. And we are also looking for topics for future webinars. We plan to host one a week. So if you have a question that can be addressed in a larger format where we will create a visual for you to actually work with and see, please let us know, and we're happy to create a webinar around another topic. Yep. So
once a week, wow.
Once a week.
That's ambitious.
That's my goal. That's my
There
goal.
you go.
Don't worry. We'll have other guests. We'll have other guests. What we're trying to do. We have a number of different partners that we've been speaking to that have other ways that they support people that are working from home, whether it's understanding how to better work with their kids and get their kids situated if that's an issue, or something that's less technical, or something from an emotional standpoint where you're basically just trying to keep everything together. So we brought together some of the resources as part of this webinar, but I do plan to have other guests moving forward that will be able to address some of the other concerns that are less technical in a working from home environment. So for today, we'll talk a little bit about the working from home versus the virtual office, common transition challenges, the different types of technology and tools that you have available to you. Obviously, we can't cover all of them here today, but we've covered a few that really make a difference in the way that we work. Some strategies for transitioning and best practices. We really believe in best practices for everything that we do. Everything that we bring to the table is, the foundation is a best practice. So by following the work from home best practices, the transition should be much simpler, easier to process. And then we'll move into some of the submitted questions and the live Q&A. I do anticipate that we'll probably go the full 75 hours, but if we move through material a little bit sooner, and then we'll have more time for the Q&A at the end. So Jason or Josh, was there anything that you wanted to touch on before we get started?
No, I think it's time to dive in.
Yeah, dive in.
Sounds good. Okay, so some of the challenges that we face in transitioning to a work from home environment, we've listed them here. I think I won't go down the entire list. I think some of the ones that we all face just in general are the reliable internet connectivity, distractions of your home, whether it's your partner or your kids, your grandkids, the finding a good work-life balance. These are all things that play into the best practices of working from home. But when we move into the technical difficulties, the technical difficulties where a lot of us really struggle to understand first, what are the right programs to be using, how to get those programs connected effectively, and then once we have everything, how to test it, make sure it is working right, and then get used to it. So just the practice of constantly using it. I spent a lot of time over the years, as I'm sure Jason and Josh have done, testing everything. Everything that came out, every new technology that came out was bright and shiny. Every new program that came out, I wanted to see how it worked and what it did. And I think that we have a range of truly exceptional solutions that will hopefully be able to support you during this process.
That's right. Yeah, there's no silver bullet. There's no one product does all, unfortunately. I wish there was. And eventually there probably will be one or two that do the majority. But right now there's no silver bullet for that.
Mm-hmm. Not yet. And, and if there were an all-in-one solution, it's not a solution for everybody. Every all-in-one I think that I've ever seen, it's always been lacking something. So finding the right combination of tools is usually what's going to support best, I think, in my opinion.
That's right.
But did you want to start?
Sure.
Just since we're diving into the technical side of things.
Yeah. So I think the first thing that's important is to understand who you are in this, because there are people who simply need to have remote access, and you touched on this a little bit, where your work is at the office, but there are occasions like right now where you're forced to work from home, whether you're sick or someone else is sick and you need to take care of them. And while your office is still your office, there needs to be a bridge between your home and your workstation at the office. And this we consider to be remote access, the ability to remotely access your workstation when the need arises as the result of something like coronavirus, or you get sick or whatever. And there are tools specifically designed to make that that possible and efficient. And we can talk about those. And then there's the work from home, where now it's a little, you've taken it a step further, where you're not just accessing your office, you're actually moving your office away from the office. And a lot of, people who are telecommuting will do this, where they may start with 2 days in the office and 3 days at home, or some combination of that, or moving exclusively to home, working almost as a freelancer or a teleworker entirely. And then the third is where the whole office virtualizes itself, which is sort of the situation we're in here at Mosaic. We don't have an office building, so we've had to move all of our infrastructure to the cloud, which is effectively the data center, and then allow our staff to access those tools remotely from wherever they happen to be. And we have folks that we work with who are both in the Washington, D.C. area, the region and the country, and even in Europe in some cases. So the neat thing about it is that you can pretty much work from wherever you happen to be sitting. The deal breaker and probably the most important piece of the puzzle is your internet connection. Without a reliable high-speed internet connection, none of this is possible. So before you do anything, you need to make sure that you're in a situation where you can connect effectively to the internet in a way that's going to allow you to stream video and make phone calls and do all of the things that you're going to need to do as the result of working from home. So step one, if you haven't already, or you don't already know, make sure that you have a reliable internet connection. It's basically the key to the whole puzzle. Beyond that, then we're talking about, challenges of, proximity or where you're sitting, things like that. So, and we can go through a lot of those, whether, you're the only one that's working remotely. Are you connecting with everyone else? The tools that you're using for that. Like Tanya said, the finding a good life-work balance. I know for myself, I find that I'm always working. It never, unless I put it down and walk away, it's sometimes, it's 9 o'clock at night and I don't even realize it and I'm still working. Or, you're up early and, what used to be an 8-hour day is now a 12-hour day. So it's good to find, and set schedule, and sort of live to that. The other big thing with working remotely is securing your work environment, making sure that the kids, don't somehow get into your laptop or your workstation and download a game or whatever it is that they may be doing and sort of interfere with what you're doing for work. Setting a dedicated space for that. All of these things are going to be challenges that get presented when you're making that initial transition. But the biggest thing is understanding what exactly you're trying to accomplish. Am I just going to be remote access? Am I trying to virtualize my, work from home, or virtualize my office entirely?
Thank you. Thank you for that, Jason. I think that outside of the technology, that's been my biggest struggle personally, has been also taking a step back. And I think that that's something that was not discussed prior to the work from home transition. It's not something you really think about because you're in your home environment, so you have no problem. It's right in front of you. You can pick it up anytime you need to, but there's a shift there when you need to versus when you want to. I think, and you end up working more than you would if your home was just your off, quote unquote, off environment.
That's right. And like I said, it's important to know what you're getting yourself into, because, and even when you buy, people, when they're buying their homes now, I remember when I moved into the house I'm currently in, I didn't ask. I didn't even think, and this was back in 2000, but I didn't ask about internet connection until I had already made the commitment to buy the house, only to realize that the internet connection that I needed didn't exist. And so I had to figure it out. But it's almost, gosh, even when you're looking at purchasing a home, it's becoming a big question. But the challenges today are much different than the challenges were 10 or 20 years ago. So It's much
So
more common to have high-speed internet now than it used to be.
we have a great comment from Chris, who said that he found it helpful to contact the ISP provider to retrieve a list of best supported routers.
Oh,
So,
yeah, most of the internet service providers will give you the router that makes sense for the service package that you're going to have. You know, that's something that they'll dictate. But one thing that you can do as a small, you know, if depending on your situation, is consider residential service versus business class service. There's a big difference, especially in price, but the internet service providers like Comcast and Verizon, for example, will guarantee a higher level of service for a business class connection than they would for residential. They will also give you priority or precedence in the service that is coming to your home office. So, for example, if you live in a very crowded community, or 100, 200 or more homes in your community, and you notice that every night at 7 o'clock, all of a sudden your speed drops by 50% because everybody's home doing whatever they're doing. If you transition to business class service, you'll get precedence over the rest of those folks that may be sharing the same pipe. So it's important to talk to your provider, not only about the router, as Chris mentioned, to make sure that you're maximizing the speed with which you can connect, but also the quality of service, to make sure that you're in the business class versus the residential class, and when people are using it, especially now where everybody's home all the time, every day, you're going to have some priority versus the other folks as a result of everybody being on at the same time. Yeah.
That's really good. That's really good to know. I never thought about that. That's really good to know. So I'm going to move on to the next slide here, where we talk a little bit about the anatomy of what the remote office looks like. So some of these pieces may be total common sense, of course, multiple monitors or dedicated workspace, but some of the others that we'll start talking through the programs and the tools that we're using, will hopefully provide some of the information that's needed.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Josh. Yeah, I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, so as Jason talked about, high-speed internet, of course, very important to have. The dedicated workspace, this is a piece that gets overlooked a lot, especially when you're just doing it on a temporary basis, or you're brand new to the working from home environment, where making sure that you have a space that is your workspace. It's not part of your home life. You're not going to be inundated with distractions of home life, especially right now when the kids are home and your other people who live with you may be home at the same time. Having that dedicated space where you can just focus on the work you need to do, and that's it. It's helpful for that mindset, that work-life balance as well, where, okay, I'm in my office space, I'm doing office work, and that's it. I leave this space and I've left the office, right? Versus, okay, I need to work from home. I'm going to take my laptop and go sit on the bed, and I'm going to let the dog come in whenever the dog wants to. And the kids can come and go, and my partner can come and go. And, that is not, you're setting yourself up for failure by not dedicating that workspace, what you can.
Yeah, and that just to interject, that becomes more important in my mind when you're transitioning to a work from home versus remote access. I mean, maybe you can get away with it if you're remote accessing for a day or two, but certainly once you make the transition to a work from home, you need to have that dedicated space for sure.
Yeah, and then once you've got your space, make sure you have what you need. So having a desk that's at the right height and size for the amount of work you're going to be doing. Have a good chair. You don't especially if you're in a situation where you're used to the office providing chairs and you need a new chair and someone from facilities comes by with a new chair. And they're all great and they support you for the 8 hours you're going to be in it. When you're at home, your back is still your back, right? Your back and your legs and your neck still need that support, and that does not change regardless of where you are. So make sure, I cannot stress enough the importance of spending the extra money on a good chair that will keep you supported, keep your back from hurting, because if your back goes out, you're not going to be productive.
Right. It's like a good mattress, right?
Exactly. It's worth a couple extra bucks. You get it back 1,000-fold by not having back pain every single day. Proper lighting, especially if you're in a situation where that workspace is going to be your basement or a back room with very little window space, or doesn't get a lot of direct sunlight, just to keep your mental sanity. Offices are typically very well lit, lots of overhead lighting, big windows, lots of natural light, artificial light. Make sure that you're getting that light. It's strain on the eyes and it's strain on the mind if you're sort of in a cave where the only light is one tiny little desk lamp and your computer screen. You're going to get headaches, and it's just not good for your mental health to not have that light. Your equipment now, of course, you need to have the right devices to do what you need to do. If your only piece of equipment that you have is your cell phone, that might not do it when you're used to having a full computer. So you have to sort of evaluate the needs of what am I going to be doing? Is this a remote access situation where I just need a little terminal that's going to connect me to my office network, and all the computing and heavy lifting is going to be done on the office side? Or do I need something, bigger and more full featured? Again, like the chair, like anything else, you get out what you put into it. A little extra money up front can save you a lot of headaches down the road. Can make it just a better work environment for yourself, long-term and short-term. One thing that having multiple monitors, a lot of offices, you get that at the office, but you don't have it at home. Find a second monitor that's the right size for you. Hook it up. Most computers, this is, these days it's no problem to get that set up. I know for me, making the switch from one monitor to two was like the heavens parting, and then when when I upgraded to 3, I said, how did I ever live with 2?
Right? And once you do it, you won't go back.
You won't go back.
No, you'll only get bigger.
Now, to be fair, I am in addition to my daily duties, I'm an engineer and a programmer. So for me, having tons of information right at my fingertips is the way I work best. Strike that balance for yourself. How much how much can you have? How much do you need to have?
Yeah.
And how much space do you have?
I would be curious about that as a poll question, Tanya. Maybe it's too late for that now, but how many people actually use multiple monitors? I would think at this point, everyone uses multiple monitors, but maybe one, maybe two. But like Josh and I have 3, and I know guys that work with 6. I mean, it's crazy, but you'd be surprised because you have one screen dedicated to email, one screen sort of your primary workspace, one screen dedicated to your communications. In my opinion, having multiple monitors is the single biggest thing you can do to increase your productivity in a remote office situation by well, next to your internet service, I suppose, but certainly one of the top 3 for sure.
Yeah. And then, so for that connectivity, especially when you're making that move away from the face-to-face communications, if you're in a line of business where folks seeing your face is important, you want to maintain as much of that face-to-face connection as you can, get a good webcam. Most laptops have a webcam built into them. The quality can vary significantly, and you're sort of stuck in terms of the angle at which people are viewing you. If you get that aftermarket webcam that works with a desktop computer or a laptop computer that you can sort of move it around, you can get the best angle,
disconnect it,
and easily disconnect it for those times when you don't want it on. Same thing with the headset. Get a good quality headset. Get something comfortable. If you're like me, I have a big head. Not just figuratively speaking, but I have physically a very large head. So I had to be very selective in the headset that I bought, to make sure, because there are days where I wear this headset for 6 hours. I'll be on the phone, I'll be making calls, taking calls, doing meetings, working with my team, working with clients, and I'll have this thing on for hours on end. Make sure it's comfortable. Make sure your sound quality is good. And again, make sure you can unplug it so that, and particularly if you are going to be doing a lot more remote talking, a lot of headsets now will have a way to mute the headset directly. Mine has a mute button. I don't have to do anything on my computer. It's a physical button. I can hit it and boom, I'm muted. Nobody has to hear me drinking or coughing.
That's right. And I think we could do a webinar on meeting etiquette.
Yeah.
Honestly, there's so many little picadillos about what you're doing, background noise, dogs barking, drinking, little things. I mean, I've seen some crazy, I don't know if anybody's been out surfing YouTube, but there have been some crazy videos, clips put on the internet now for people working from home on Zoom, for example, and they don't realize or they don't remember that they're on video and they're, walking around in their underwear or, picking their nose, God knows what. So meeting etiquette could definitely be.
Yeah, we'll leave the in-depth conversation of that for another topic. I will just leave it.
Right.
Having spent many years now doing all these meetings remotely, the sound of someone drinking coming through my headset, if I never heard that again, I would be happy.
Yep.
So, and
guilty as charged.
So don't be that person. Do your team a favor and don't drink right in their ear. But moving on to the technologies here, we've got some of the lovely logos here for tech that we use, we love, and I think we should just dive in to the specifics here. There are certain tools that you may already be using, that you're using in the office, in a traditional office, that the setup and the reliability of those tools becomes even more important, because if you're used to talking on Slack, but Slack's down, or you're not at your computer, you can walk down the hall and say hi to that person. Well, now you can't walk down the hall. That person isn't there anymore, right? The hall isn't there anymore. So you have to trust your technology. So Zoom obviously is one that we're big fans of, it's what we're on right now. Very simple to set up. The use has exploded here. So both the blooper reels, as it were, that are on YouTube are out there to see how people are doing it wrong, but also tutorials on how to do it right. But it's a very straightforward system to use. You connect, you've got your audio, your video, you can phone in, you can use a mic, whatever your best quality is. Like we said here, this is sort of both meeting etiquette and the work from home situation where, well, now if you're not having that meeting where everyone can see what you're doing, right? You're sitting around a conference table and, you can see if your intern is playing on their phone. You know, when you're remote, you can't see that. So making that conscious choice, and it's a, you know, it's a subconscious thing, right? The meeting starts to drift into a direction that, you know, you're maybe not as engaged in, you know, and your email's still dinging on the other screen. You know, that inclination to start answering those emails, you know, just as you're making work time, make meeting time, right? You're going to say, okay, I'm not going to answer those emails until the meeting is done.
Just close it all outright.
Close it out, or minimize it, turn it off however you can turn it off. And, you know,
why do I feel like you're talking to me?
I'm talking to me as much as I'm talking to you.
Right.
And then again,
that attention, you can tell when somebody splits their attention. It's pretty clear, or pretty obvious. Yeah.
And that's again where that mute button becomes comes into play. You know, if you are going to disengage partially, you know, make sure you're not creating a distraction for the others in your meeting. You know, and the environment, you know, you don't want that background noise. You don't, you know, things sound different on a microphone than they do on a regular phone call. So if you're using that headset, you know, spend some time testing it out with one of your colleagues and see, okay, how much ambient noise is actually coming through my mic? If it turns out you've got a really, really sensitive microphone and the dog barking you can hear him from the other end of the house where you can't hear it on a cell phone, you know, turn your mic sensitivity down. Right. But you're not necessarily going to know that unless you take a little bit of time, just test it out with a colleague, see how it works.
And I think by default, in my opinion, you know, video, having video on no meeting should start with video on. It should be a specifically discussed thing. In my mind, audio and screen sharing are the sort of the common things that should be happening in any conference of any kind. And then the video becomes secondary, and if it's necessary. Otherwise, you know, in my opinion, it should be off as much as, you know, almost always. I don't know that there's any reason to have video if you can share a screen. So my 2 cents on that.
All right. So your productivity software obviously is next. You know, I think at this point, everyone knows the Office suite, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Outlook. You know, those are, you know, not new, and they're not going anywhere. So
they're
really
all cloud-based now. So I mean, there's no excuse really.
And they are all cloud-based. So there are online versions of the applications, and most licensing plans nowadays, by design, you can install on multiple computers. So you can have it on your work computer, you can have it on your home computer, you can have it on your laptop, you can have it on your tablet, all with the same license. You know, but making sure, again, taking that time, making sure everything works, that you've got it installed properly, the license is properly activated, you can get to your documents, you can connect, and keep working. You know, if you can't access one particular piece of hardware, the important thing is, can you access your data?
Yeah, Microsoft is really, I mean, certainly there are other technologies in the world, Google and such, Amazon, but I mean, Microsoft has done so much to facilitate the remote office, the work from home virtual office environment, as much as any other company, if not more. You can probably argue, Google is certainly up there too. But I mean, without Office 365 and that platform, and now Teams is coming along, which we'll talk about. I mean, without those two things, it's virtually impossible to be efficient or productive from home beyond the meeting. So Teams is a huge piece of it. It's getting bigger. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Teams is a platform that Microsoft has been rolling out over the last, really they've been ramping it up over the last year in a big way. And it's, when you talk about silver bullet applications, they're getting close. It's still a work in progress. It's still,
rougher on the edges.
But the edges are getting less rough, and they're getting fewer and far between. As an integrated platform where you have live communication, you've got connection to file storage in the form of SharePoint, one button syncing for OneDrive for business. You can have emails get sent to a particular channel. So, someone sends you an email, you need to share it with a team. Well, you can just forward it to the channel, and then it's part of your communications history. You can, it integrates natively with your calendar. It's really coming along quite well. As a sort of single, Teams plus Outlook becomes, your hub for sort of day-to-day communications. The other big one that we use is Slack for your
interoffice.
Yeah, for your live communication. If you're not a Microsoft client or don't want to be a Microsoft client, or Teams doesn't do what you want to do for whatever reason, Slack has been the gold standard for years. I think Slack and Teams are sort of competing with one another pretty directly now. But Slack it makes it very easy to stay connected to your team. You can set up those notification times and preferences. So, okay, at 6 p.m., I'm going to stop getting alerts on my phone. When it's time to stop working.
Right. Yeah, it's fantastic because you can thread things. I mean, you can keep things so organized. Slack is a huge tool in the remote office for sure, virtual office.
Mm-hmm. And then Jason, if you want to talk about Acuity, because I know
I'll let Tanya take that one. She's the most familiar with that. Tanya, talk about. I mean, you introduced me to this, and because I never really used it, and I frankly still don't use it as much as I should be. But tell us about it.
So Acuity Scheduler is absolutely amazing. There are so many schedulers out there. The majority of them are low or no cost, but not many of them are as comprehensive as Acuity. When you first get started with it, you have the option of attaching multiple calendars. So if you keep personal appointments on one calendar, and you keep work appointments, business appointments on another calendar, it can take both of them and then account for these appointments when it comes to people using it to create an appointment with you. So if you have a client that you're trying to set up an appointment with, rather than going back and forth through email, are you available at 3? Are you available at 4? By providing a link to your calendar, and you can have multiple calendars as needed, they can choose the time that's best for them based on the availability that you have already set. So you can control every aspect of what your calendar looks like. And the next step for this, the next level for this, is the ability to accept payments. So if you have a class or an event, something that has a specific starting time, you can integrate it into your website or provide it as a standalone link. Your potential client will click on the link, will register for the class using a form that you create. So they have basic, your name, your email, but you can create custom items that you ask when somebody is first registering, which is really helpful. They'll register, and then before they can actually complete the registration process, then any payment that you have assigned to that particular class is paid. So you can integrate different types of payment options. So it's a really comprehensive scheduler. You can sign up for free. There's a free trial. It takes a little bit to get it set up at the beginning, just to make sure that everything is working correctly. But once you get it set up, it's amazing what you can do with it.
And keeping that calendar organized nowadays is, so much more important. If you compare to the, traditional 9-to-5 life, where it's like, okay, from 9 to 5, I'm always at work, right? So I'm going to have work meetings during that time period, but none of my personal meetings are going to be involved in that. There's going to be little to no overlap between the personal calendar and the work calendar. And for both, for yourselves and, considering your clientele as well, well, you're not the only ones working from home now. Your clients are working from home, so their availability is going to be changed. And so the more you can sort of work within that and keep your own calendar open, but not create those conflicts, Acuity is a tool that really makes that possible for you to keep everything organized, right? So you're not saying, oh yeah, I'm going to run to the, to this appointment for my kid. Oh wait, that's at the same time as this important meeting,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Exactly. And just to interject, so when it comes to appointments, if you were to say I have appointments set up in my calendar every 30 minutes for the next 4 hours, if you were to have a scheduling conflict, it will automatically remove those conflicts or that availability from the calendar. So if somebody's scheduling, it'll be scheduled around your availability instead of having it conflict.
Yeah. So now, and these are good tools no matter what your environment is, whether you're talking about the remote access, the work from home, or the virtual office. These are tools that sort of across the board are gonna help. Now we're sort of getting into tools that are more more tailored, more tailored use. There's a program called Screen Connect that we've been using for many, many years for remote connections. But especially now where, all of a sudden you can't get to your work computer and you have no time to set up a virtual office, right? You need to keep working while the virtual office is being built out. Screen Connect is a great program that you can use to connect to your office computer as if you were sitting there in the office. You don't have to spend the time rebuilding the firewalls and networking. It runs over the same sort of channels as secure web traffic. So it's real easy to set up. And then, while you're building out your virtual office or your work from home solution, you can keep yourself connected to those office, the resources that are still physically in the office.
And there's a lot of flavors of that. Screen to Connect is one flavor of the remote access, suite of software. There's TeamViewer and remote desktop connection that Microsoft has, and Screen Connect, and so this thing may come in a lot of different flavors or shapes and sizes. It just depends on how you're connecting to your office. Really, that drives that, and to some degree, preference. So that's for sure.
All right. So now we want to
move to the virtual office.
To the virtual office, and this is more sort of what our model is, which is really taking
data center centric, right?
Yeah, taking your operations and moving it away from the individual computer and moving it into the data center.
Well, out of the server closet, right?
Out of the server closet and
right.
into the data center.
Correct. Or the cloud at large. Yep.
Yeah. So there are, as many ways to set this up as there are offices. Really what matters is, finding the solution for your team. What is going to keep you and your team connected to your data, connected to your clients? Some of the best practices, you want to make sure your data is redundant. Are you backing up your data? Do you have if the server catches on fire or stops being available, how are you going to get to your data? How are you going to recover that data? So that piece of it, whether you're on-prem, in the office, or you're fully remote, fully virtualized, it is something to take into consideration as a long-term solution. But that, when you're looking at a virtual connection, that's part of the infrastructure is, okay, well, my data is no longer in a server 10 feet away from me. How am I going to get to it in a secure way? VoIP phones. This is another big challenge that a lot of folks face is, okay, I need to still be able to use my work number, right? We've had the same business number for 20 years and folks call that number and it's all over the web, but my phone is no longer accessible to me, right? The phone on the desk is staying in the office and I'm not. So one solution that we have is the 3CX provider. You move that, you move the phone number over to that provider, and then it becomes virtual, right? You can run your phones from anywhere. You can still use your desk phone when you're in the office, or you can have an app on your computer. You can have an app on your cell phone, which is actually what I do. I like to take calls on my phone. So I just have the 3CX app installed on my cell phone, and when someone calls into my work line, it comes up on my cell phone. Someone calls my personal line, comes up on my cell phone in a different way, and either way, I can take calls, and very easy to say, okay, no longer, I'm leaving the office for the day. I'm no longer available. Send everybody to voicemail, same as if I was standing up and leaving the building.
And your voicemails can be emailed to you then too. So when a message is left, it gets emailed to your email box, and you can listen to your voicemail right from your email. You don't have to check your voicemail. You just log into your email.
Yep.
And it has a full suite. I mean, you can have auto attendant, call queues, and there's so many different things. It's a full functioning, system. From the auto attendant down, and call queues. You can have groups of people that will be systematically, if there's a support line or help desk like we have, it'll ping, Sally first, and then Jane second, and then Joe third, and it'll cycle through that loop. So there's so many things. And then with the phone numbers, and I wanted to make this point, is you can port any phone number you want to what's called a SIP trunk, which effectively moves it from the analog world to the digital world. And then once your phone number has been associated with this SIP trunk, as long as you have access to the internet, you can have your calls routed out of the analog to the digital, and then have that basically pointed to whatever voice over IP system you happen to use. 3CX is a flavor of this. There are many flavors that exist in the world. The key is that you have your telephone number ported over to the digital equivalent, and then you can effectively connect that with the PBX, the voice over IP system, and then set that up to receive calls and add other numbers and extensions and all kinds of things like that.
And the VoIP solutions is really one of those areas where it starts as a pain point of, I need my phones available to me outside of the office, and all of a sudden it's like, well, not only am I solving that problem, but I'm getting 10 more features that I didn't know didn't know I needed until I had them, and now I can't live without them.
Right. Yeah, like the extra monitor. Right.
All right. So why don't we? I know we're
remote file storage. Oh yeah, we're getting way over time.
Yeah. So remote file storage, again, with the data center, there's a lot of different platforms. Whether you've got an existing file storage that's just a computer sitting in the data center, whether you're already in love with SharePoint or Google Drive or some other solution, make sure you have that access as you set up, so you don't have to rely on your office connection. And if what you've got isn't going to work in a remote situation, that's when you want to look at migrating that data out or setting up other connection avenues. But again, there are as many flavors of that as there are offices. The more you can test ahead of kicking everyone out of the building, the better, obviously. But there are many different ways to get people connected to their data in a secure
Inside
way.
the office. Yeah.
Yeah, in a secure way.
So we're what, 30 minutes out, Tanya,
Wait.
roughly?
Yeah, we're a little under 30 minutes out. So we'll move through the rest of the slides fairly quickly. A lot of the things that we'll cover and that we'll hit, some of them are common sense. Some of them, we're going to make sure to send the slide deck out. So if you have additional questions once we do, please reach back out to us. So just a couple more minutes as we move through these slides, and then we will open it up for live questions, some of which we already have. So just really quick, some other tools. These are tools that I know that I personally can't live without. Evernote is one of them. It syncs across all your environments, as well as can be downloaded directly onto your laptop or desktop. And it's really, really helpful. It helps to clip if you're online and you need to basically favorite something or save a clip for later. Really easy to clip using their app. They have a premium, but I haven't had to go that far yet. LastPass, awesome for secure password management, especially if you potentially need to share passwords. It's free, easy to use, and the slide deck that we send out will have the links to all of these items. Awesome screenshot. So when you have multiple monitors, if you try to screenshot using your computer, quite often you'll get a screenshot that has all of your monitors, not just the one that you're going for. So although with the premium version of Awesome Screenshot, you can also screenshot your desktop. If it's not something that you need, this is totally free, can be downloaded really easily. It's just a web extension, and it allows you to take screenshots quickly and easily and then send them out. Grammarly, I think whether you're in office or in a home office, Grammarly is absolutely essential because it catches grammar mistakes, spelling mistakes in email across all different types of devices and platforms. So this is a excellent extension to use. Pocket, there are a lot of different apps that are like Pocket. So if you have a favorite, I'm not suggesting you switch, but essentially if you're reading an article or something online and you want to save it later for to read, Pocket is great. You can save content from just about anywhere. Chrometa is great. One of the things that I've always struggled with is keeping track of my own time, just because I'm jumping around between so many different things during the day that I don't always have that extra second to take a breath, start my time for the next task. So Chrometa is something that you download onto your computer. It keeps, during work hours, it keeps track of everything within reason. You can adjust the settings, what you're doing on your computer, so that you know how much time you spent on your email, you know how much time you spent on social media, you know how much time you're spending, and you can actually set it up to where this time is tracked towards different projects. So if you have different projects that you're working on and you don't want to have to stop to track your time, Chrometa is an excellent tool. I'll talk for just one more moment about my CurDesign Studio. So when you first go to the site, it's a little misleading because it specifically talks about changing your job, career management, allowing you to design your own career. But I have found it tremendously helpful to help me better understand what I'm naturally good at. When you separate from the rest of your team and you're working in your own home office, sometimes you're trying to take on tasks or you're trying to fill a role that isn't the best role for you, and it can cause additional stress as you're trying to manage or figure out what your next steps are. There are a lot of tools within this program that allows you to, that you can leverage in order to learn how to set priorities, stay balanced. There's a really great assistant in there that lets you like refocus if you're feeling overwhelmed. So, I mean, it has a 7-day free trial. It's definitely worth taking advantage of the 7 days. A lot you can get done in 7 days. And then the next 2 slides that we'll cover are just going to talk about best practices. One of the best practices and recommendations are to listen to something in the background, whether it's TV, white noise, music, podcast, TED Talk, something to keep you focused. So when we send this out, provided a few resources for you.
Good.
As we're moving forward into the next slides, if you do have additional questions that we can answer for you, I know that I have a couple of questions as well. Please feel free to add them into the Q&A now, and then we'll cover them in just a couple of minutes. And I'm sorry, Jason, did you want to say something?
No, nope, that's perfect.
Okay.
I'm just going to say we'll try and get through these pretty fast, so we have time.
Fairly quickly, yeah.
Yeah.
Jason or Josh, did you want to take
I'll take
these?
this one, and I'll let Josh take the next one. So, there are certain strategies you can apply to to a work from home environment. Most of them, like Tanya said, are common sense. Obviously, you want to get started early. Try and maintain the same sort of schedule that you would have if you were going to the office. In fact, pretend like you're going to the office. Plan out what you're going to be doing ahead of time so that you're efficiently handling that in the course of your day. Shouldn't be much different than what it would be if you were in the actual office, or if you're in your home office. Same thing applies. Keeping organized. Creating a dedicated workspace. We talked a little bit about that. Very, very important to have a dedicated workspace, and letting the people around you know that this is your dedicated workspace. And like the on air, when you're on the air, like, be quiet, stay away, I'm on air. That sort of mentality. When I'm working, keep the kids away. Stay away. I'm doing my thing. Working outside the office, I don't personally find working outside the office to be advantageous at all, but I know a lot of people that do, so I thought it was good to add that. Just if nothing else, for a change of scenery, working from a coffee shop, working from, a quiet park, if there's, assuming there's internet connection. It's mainly, that strategy would be to just sort of mix it up, and you're not always, stuck in your cave. Planning to work when you're at your most productive. For me, I'm a night person, not as opposed to a more, an early bird. So my schedule tends to work more in the evening hours. That's when I feel like I'm the most productive, but I know there are other people that are just the opposite. The key is to try not to end up working 12 hours a day. That's the most important thing. I think it's a good idea to save calls and meetings for later in the day so that you're more, on your game. Taking, again, you could probably argue this a lot of different ways, but for me personally, I like to get into the office, get my head together, sort of get organized, and then start taking calls once I've had that time to sort of let the dust settle for the day, get emails, under control, things like that, and then start taking meetings. And then pushing something into the background to focus. Yeah, so that goes to what Tanya was just talking about, where, I oftentimes will have, CNBC or, some random news channel on, because it doesn't really engage me. It's just kind of white noise almost. Music is a good thing. It should always be at a low volume though, so that it's not distracting, for sure.
And then, when you're talking about, especially nowadays, new environments, new work from home environments, and if you're already a work from homer, if others are going to be in your home that didn't used to be, communication. Talk to the other folks who are going to be in your environment and say, okay, I need these hours to be my work time. I need to not have any distractions. These hours I'm a little flexible, and these are the hours I'm going to be stopping working. And talk to your living partners, whether they're roommates, spouses, partners, whatever, whoever you're living with, and talk to your workmates as well, because if you're making that transition, then everybody else is too. And you're not alone in this. You try to keep it as normal as possible, but make allowances for those shifts. It is a different environment, but it's a different environment for everybody. Set and take clear breaks. This is one where I'm definitely talking to myself. Make sure you're getting up from your desk at regular intervals. Your body needs to move. We are not designed to sit in one spot for 8-9 hours in a row. We're not supposed to focus on one thing for 8 or 9 hours in a row. So get up, walk around, stretch your body, Stretch your arms, stretch your legs, stretch your back. Make sure you're staying hydrated. Don't just drink coffee all day long. Make sure you're drinking water, and don't forget to interact with other humans. Especially if you're used to that commute where you're on the road with a bunch of people, or you're on the subway or your bus with lots of people, then you're in the office with people, and then you got your commute home with people, and then you've got your family at home. Well, now it's just your family, and for a lot of the day it's just you. So make sure, especially on those break times, after work times, that you're talking to other people. Talk on the phone to your colleagues, maybe more than you used to. Since you're not seeing each other face to face, you're going to have those communications. Meal planning, just as important as it was when you're going to the office. But don't say to yourself, "Oh, well, I'm home now. I can spend 2 hours making my lunch," right? Because I'm at home. Invariably,
or not do it at all.
Or not do it at all.
Right.
But if you're planning on cooking in the middle of the day, don't do that, because your phone's going to be ringing, your email's going to be dinging, and then you're going to end up not eating. Make it difficult to waste time on social media. This is important, I think, in any environment. But without that, you're the only accountability to you a lot of times. So those productivity tools that Tanya was talking about, there are other apps that can, productivity apps that can make it so, okay, from 9 to 5, the Facebook app isn't going to work on my phone, right? And then pick a definitive finishing time each day. This is really important. I think, like Tanya was saying at the very beginning, it's easy to, once your work space and your home space merge, that email comes in at 7:00. Well, you see it on your phone, the urge to just, I'm just going to run downstairs real quick and answer this email, right? Well, really consider, whereas before you would say, okay, I'm only going to answer this from my phone if it's an emergency, and it has to be a really critical emergency. Well, that hasn't changed. Don't let that change just because the barrier to answering that email has gone down. You need to separate your work life and your personal life, for your own sanity. And this is true across any industry, no matter what your environment is. If you're always on the clock, if you never disengage, your work life, your home life is going to suffer. Your work life is going to suffer too. We are designed to do different things through the day. Our brains are not productive when we stay on task at work all the time.
Right.
So disengage, let yourself disengage, give yourself permission to disengage. It seems like a silly thing to say, but some people need to hear that is, you are the one who has to grant that permission. And it's important to do so.
Yeah. I think people either they're always on, or they have a hard time getting turned on. You know what I mean? You're either distracted by everything around you and have a hard time getting on to work and staying with it, or you're in it all the time and you can't turn it off. It's sort of one or the other. So finding the balance is certainly a key, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
that was quick.
I hope that it was yeah, the last two slides it was easier to talk through those than talking through the tech side of things. And so we'll move right now into the live questions, and then I have a couple of follow-up questions as well. And thank you to everybody who stuck with us through the webinar so far, and hopefully we were able to answer your questions. So one question that was posed by several people is how to conduct meetings with multiple parties. Specific question is, my clients are small cities and towns. I need to conduct meetings so they comply with legal standards for open meetings. So not only do I need to interact with the board members, the general public needs to be able to see what we are doing and ask us questions or provide input.
Right. Well, that sounds like what we're doing here. The ability to get on to a live chat or, a webinar, using Zoom, for example, as the platform. You can bring in panelists like we've done here, and open it up to the public. So in this scenario, I would imagine the board members would potentially be panelists along with a host, and then the public would come in, and whether it's a town hall forum or where, you're actually interfacing with people direct, where they're not necessarily sitting and just listening, they can speak or whatever. You can do both of those in this platform. So I would say look at Zoom or WebEx for sure.
Mm-hmm. And between the two, I would say, at least in my opinion, that Zoom has been much easier to maneuver through the settings and the way that it works if you're not used to using programs like this.
Yeah, I agree. It's very user friendly, no doubt about it. I think both WebEx and Zoom it's kind of six and one half dozen of the other. WebEx certainly comes out of the corporate landscape. And the Zoom, I think, was more, end user oriented. I don't know if that makes sense, but certainly, yeah, Zoom has gotten very popular. I mean, all you have to do is look at the stock market. They're the green number in a sea of red right now.
So the next question ties into a question that I had. So I know that sometimes I'll communicate with people that still have DSL because of the location where they live, or the quality of their internet in general is just very, very low. It's difficult for them to use tools that, like the ones that we're recommending. For screen sharing and video, do many of the apps have any settings to decrease the quality if the internet speed or bandwidth is limited?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's why I say leave video off until it's necessary, because that in and of itself is going to single-handedly suck the most bandwidth down. So to the extent that you can leave video off, do it. If you do need it, there are settings in Zoom and WebEx both, I believe, to eliminate high definition. So you can reduce the quality. I'll have to look. Maybe we can get a link to the specifics on adjusting settings in Zoom for that. But I'm fairly certain that you can not only reduce the resolution quality, but also even the frame rates to some degree, probably. So, but the best thing is to just leave it off, and screen sharing. Yeah, I mean, screen sharing takes up some bandwidth, but not nearly what video takes up because of the frame rates primarily, and the high quality 4K. If you have a 4K camera, that's crazy. That's so much bandwidth going there. So
if you're on a call and the connection is choppy and your video is on, if you drop video, then the call, while it may not be perfect, the quality will probably get much better.
Oh yeah, and what are your kids doing, or what are the others in your house doing? Are they, upstairs watching Netflix and everybody's on the same internet? So you may have to coordinate what folks are doing when you're going to be on a video call or something like that. So just a little bit of planning goes a long way for that, for sure.
I think the biggest question for me comes back to the home office and the home office setup, and figuring out what I need or what do I need to provide. And is that something that I'm better off using tools and figuring out myself? Is that something I can figure out myself, or am I better off working with somebody to help me figure out what I need?
Josh, you want that one, or you want me to take it? Josh? Well, I think that if your work,
sorry, my mic was muted there.
Go ahead.
But no, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, if your employer doesn't issue you a work, station, a laptop, or whatever, then I would recommend getting something that makes sense for you, and hopefully it will also make sense for what you're doing at work. Generally speaking, people are going to spend a little more money on their personal gear and then use that for work than they would if it was just a work device. Alternatively, you can separate the two. Have something that you use for work exclusively, and it is kept that way. And then you have your personal. In fact, I would sort of recommend that, because then you don't have to worry about, you know, the day-to-day, the personal Facebook stuff, all that getting mixed into your work, and having a screen share and inadvertently having personal communications come into the screen or whatever. I think it'll go a long way to avoiding, you know, embarrassing moments or whatever it might be, where the personal life is mixing in. So to the extent that you can establish a separate workspace for and hardware for work and personal, that's great. If you can't do that and your company isn't providing you with a laptop or something, then I would absolutely get what you feel is best for you, and then the tools, you know, integrating the tools into that and trying to keep it separated to the extent that you can. Um, but I mean, I use the same workstation for both personal stuff and work, and you just have to have you know, keep it in mind that, you know, if if you know your kid texts you or sends you an instant message while you're in a screen sharing, you know, keep it somewhere where it's not going to be visible, or you're doing your banking, you know, or something like that, and someone has to remote access your machine, that your financial statements aren't sitting there for people to see. That's, you know, that's the big thing. Same with cameras. I mean, we talked about the bloopers and stuff going around. You know, be aware when you're on video or on mic, and when your mic isn't muted. I mean, I think, frankly, Tani, we should have a meeting or a webinar on meeting etiquette, frankly.
That's, yeah, I agree. That's definitely something that we can plan out. There is a whole lot going around online right now, for sure.
Yeah, this is a wave.
So,
I don't think this is going anywhere. I mean, you know, once people get a taste of work from home, whether it's remote access or getting set up in a work, you know, in a you know, a virtual office, or a, you know, just a you know, work at home environment, I see those sort of as three different things. Once they sort of get that taste and realize they don't have to be stuck in the car for 2 hours a day, they're going to do it, and I think employers are going to be more inclined to let that happen as well. And thank God, because that makes traffic. I mean, I mean, of all the bad things that coronavirus brings to us, traffic is not one of them. I mean, it's unbelievable driving around right now, how easy it is to get around. Boy, that would be nice if it was this way all the time. Wouldn't it be?
Yeah, it's done, because of that, it's done really good things for the environment as well, despite the impact that it's having on,
and on the
positive
economy.
light on
Right.
things.
Right. But now if we all do our part and make remote, you know, the transition from work to home, you know, or working remotely from the office, the next time, if and when this happens again, it won't be a big deal. I mean, we'll just be able to make that transition. The economy will continue to hum along. And with the exception of, you know, hospitality, you know, I mean, certainly there are going to be some industries where it's important to be on site and in person, but for the most part, business will continue to hum along. Maybe we lose 25% instead of 100% or 50%.
So just as a, you know, as a final just thought, I would say that one of the most important things is being prepared. And what this means is think through everything that you do on a typical day at work and an atypical day at work, to make sure that every single one of the activities that you do, whether it's meeting or everything is mapped to a particular tool or software or plan, so that if something comes up unexpectedly, you don't panic or feel overwhelmed because you don't have something in place to handle that particular situation. So spending a little bit of time preparing and thinking through this, and then kind of mapping this out. This is awesome and a really good way to use Evernote just to get started. Just to map out like what programs, what tools, how to use it, and what questions you still have. So that way the questions are not just running around in your head, because most people don't do well with a list of questions in their head. Always better to have the questions in front of you so that you feel prepared to basically perform whatever activity is being asked of you.
Yeah, amen.
So that's, yeah. And I will say that from personal experience. So just as a final, you know, we are available to chat through our website. So if you have any additional questions that we didn't answer, or you need help thinking through what your virtual office looks like or should look like, either for yourself or for somebody else, please connect with us. You can call us, we'll chat, whatever's needed, or we can set up a call to talk through, probably on Zoom. And we will be sending out both the slide deck with all the resources and links, and also just 2 or 3 questions just to see how we did. Like we said, this is the very first one that we're putting out, just trying to get people the information that they need so that they can work more efficiently and feel better prepared for what's going to be a while before whatever this next phase is. So thank you again for joining us, and
topics too, right? We should encourage people
absolutely.
to send topics too. If there's something on your mind that you want us to discuss, send it in. Send it in.
That'll definitely be part of it if there are any topics that you want to see in the future. And it may be just a simple vote for some of the topics that we're considering discussing, and getting your feedback would be really great. So thank you again so much for joining us. And Jason and Josh, thank you so much for all your expertise, all your information. I know that we're all always available to step in and help, but really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. Thank you for pulling all this together in such short order. That's been fantastic. Yeah. Very pleased with how this came together. Very good.
Excellent.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you.
Happy Friday.
Thank you, everyone. Happy Friday. Right. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.